What's going on, everyone? Today we are ranking the top 10 Star Wars animated lightsaber duels. These battles will be from TV shows such as The Clone Wars, Rebels, as well as a few others that may surprise you. As much as I love titles like The Old Republic and Jedi Fallen Order, for this list there won't be any lightsaber duels from Star Wars video games. These rankings were even more difficult to decide upon than my rankings of live-action lightsaber duels. Definitely go watch my rankings of the live-action ones at the end of this video. If you love Star Wars, or if you love movies, and you want to help support the channel, like the video and subscribe with the bell notification on so you don't miss an upload. And let me know down in the comments what your favorite animated lightsaber duel is. Let's get into it. Number 10. The Ronin versus the Bandit leader, Star Wars Visions. I mentioned there may be some surprises on this list, and we're starting it off with one of my favorites from Star Wars Visions, an anthology series of 9 animated short films that debuted on Disney Plus in September of 2021. Yes, this may be cheating a little bit, as these short films aren't technically considered to be Star Wars canon. However, this lightsaber duel in particular is nevertheless deserving of a spot. Star Wars Visions throws you right into the action with its first episode, The Duel. 20 years after a war between the feudal Jedi Empire and a renegade Jedi sect called the Sith, a lone wanderer known as the Ronin, a former Sith, witnesses a legion of former stormtrooper bandits attempt to besiege a small village. The Ronin fights the leader of the bandits, a self-declared Dark Lord of the Sith, armed with a heavily modified lightsaber. The scene is a stunningly beautiful piece of animation that combines elements of lightsaber combat with that of traditional samurai fighting styles. The uniqueness of the duel in this style of animation stands out amongst all those of the entire show, and more largely even Star Wars as a whole. Both the Ronin and Sith leader are compelling characters that leave you wondering how you could become so invested in a standalone 15-minute anime. As the cherry on top, the duel also has a really cool ending. The episode is fantastic, and if you still haven't seen Star Wars Visions, definitely go check it out. Number 9. Anakin Skywalker vs. Barriss Offee, The Clone Wars. Opinions on lightsaber duels can vary greatly, but one important consideration that I always take into account is not just how flashy the fight looks, but also its implications and its effect upon the characters involved and the overall story arc. For example, the duel between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in Episode 4 obviously isn't flashy at all, but its effect on the plot and the story of the original trilogy can't be understated. Similarly, the fight between Anakin and Barriss may not land in the top 10 based on flashiness alone, but it is one of, if not the most important duels of the Clone Wars series when it comes to Anakin's character specifically. At the time, Ahsoka was being put on trial as the prime suspect of the bombing of the Jedi Temple. The duel begins with Anakin confronting Barriss Offee, a young Jedi Padawan. Anakin is seeking more information in regards to the bombing of the temple after being led to Barriss via information from Assaj Ventress. Upon accusation, Barriss summons 2 red-bladed lightsabers that she had stolen from Ventress. Both Barriss and Anakin duel using Jar Kai, the method of lightsaber combat that employs the use of 2 lightsabers. The encounter begins in Barriss's quarters, continues in aggressive and anger-inspired combat in the Jedi Temple hallways, and culminates in the Jedi Temple courtyard, where Anakin is able to subdue Barriss using his superior force abilities, with the temple guards and many younglings present to witness. The duel importantly emphasizes 2 things. First, there is a growing amount of people becoming disillusioned with the Jedi Order, in this case, a Jedi Padawan. Barriss sees the Jedi as having become corrupted and violent servants of the Republic. Second, and even more importantly, we see Anakin's growing anger both before, throughout, and after the duel. His frustration with the Senate, and most especially the Jedi Order, is growing day by day, and he takes much of this anger out on Barriss during the duel, coming close to force choking her into submission. This is one of my favorite episodes of the Clone Wars because it sheds light on Anakin drawing nearer to the dark side, as his Padawan Ahsoka chooses not to rejoin the Order, and he begins to give more into his anger. His fight with Barriss is an excellent example of how using anger in a duel can slowly lead to hate. Number 8. Anakin vs. Assaj Ventress, Clone Wars. This one may be out of left field if you're a bit newer to Star Wars fandom, but for fans of the 2003 2D miniseries Star Wars Clone Wars, you definitely will remember this duel. Clone Wars was renowned at its time and won several Emmys for Outstanding Animated Program. The moment most well remembered throughout the entirety of the show is the confrontation between Anakin and Ventress on Yavin 4, a cool tribute to the original 1977 film. After taking out Anakin's clone troopers one by one and destroying his speeder along with his R4 unit, Assaj Ventress confronts Anakin, brandishing her signature curved hilt red lightsabers. What sets this duel apart is the flexibility that the 2D animation style allows the showrunners to employ in order to create a fight not as bound by the space it inhabits, compared to a 3D animated duel, which more so utilizes elements of realism. The duel shifts from the jungle floors to the treetops above, as the pair continue their fight, jumping from branch to branch and swinging from vines. The duel eventually relocates once again to the temples of Yavin 4, but not before the longest, and I mean longest, stare downs in all of Star Wars. The use of rain during this portion adds to the intensity of the remainder of the clash. As Anakin loses his saber atop a Yavin temple, he forcibly takes one of Ventress's lightsabers. A close-up of the two reveals shock and perhaps fear on Ventress's face, as Anakin's image becomes highlighted by the glow of the red saber. He aggressively uses her own weapon against her, resulting in Ventress falling far into the canyon below. The iconic scene is topped off with a war cry from Anakin as he continues to hold the glowing red saber. Similar to his duel against Barriss, the duel is meant to highlight Anakin's growing anger within. It is probably the most overlooked duel on this list. Nonetheless, the epic showdown absolutely deserves a spot, and if you haven't seen the original 2003 Clone Wars, I highly recommend a watch through. Number 7. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Assaj Ventress versus Maul and Savage Opress. The Clone Wars. Obi-Wan, Ventress, Maul, and his brother Savage Opress have so many incredible duels throughout the Clone Wars that makes choosing between them very difficult. This one stands out amongst the crowd for several reasons. The first and most obvious reason is the combination of the duel's combatants. Assaj Ventress, one of the most notorious villains of the Clone Wars era, is fighting alongside the likes of Obi-Wan and fending off the attack together from the Dathomirian brothers. Another out-of-the-ordinary aspect of the duel is that this is the only time we ever see Obi-Wan use a red lightsaber. Maul has taken his blade, and Ventress lends one of her two red sabers to Kenobi when the brothers confront the Jedi and the Witch pairing. With all members of the battle wielding red lightsabers, the four engage in close-quarters combat surrounded by shipping containers. Eventually, Obi-Wan is able to retrieve his blue lightsaber back from Maul's waistband during the battle, but the aggressive fighting style of Savage and Maul slowly become too much to handle. The pairs break off with Savage fighting Ventress, while Obi-Wan and Maul showdown in a vent above. It is this portion of the duel that, in my opinion, makes it deserving of a spot on the list. Maul taunts Obi-Wan viciously, driving and twisting the metaphorical knife deep.
Your master, Qui-Gon Jinn. I gutted him while you stood helpless and watched. How did that make you feel?
It is one of the first and only times we experience what feels like true anger and a desire for revenge from Obi-Wan. In the end, Obi-Wan and Ventress manage to narrowly escape via an escape pod as Obi-Wan lifts Ventress over the head of Savage and to safety. This is one of the 4 canonical times that we see Obi-Wan duel Maul, and it certainly does not disappoint. Number 6. Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Maul, Star Wars Rebels. Speaking of Kenobi and Maul duels, here's another one of the 4 encounters the two have with each other over the years. However, this is the final fight between the two of them, and it takes place years later on the sands of Tatooine. I lied earlier. This might be the longest stare down in Star Wars history. What's great about this duel isn't the over-the-top theatrics of an extensively long action sequence, but rather two foes who in their old age cast shadows of grief, and in Maul's case, an intense hatred of anyone who gets in his way, especially Obi-Wan. Maul's hate is not without thought and reason. He is curious as to why Obi-Wan is so far removed and hiding away from the world. While he is intent on killing Kenobi, he considers the thought that leaving him to rot away may be an even worse fate, before he realizes that Obi-Wan isn't there to hide, but to protect someone. It is at this point Obi-Wan knows that Maul must be stopped and ignites his lightsaber. The entire experience is reminiscent of 2 cowboys getting ready to showdown in the Wild West. In fact, the showdown portion of the encounter is probably 10 times longer than the actual duel itself. It's subtle, but there is a reference to the Duel of Fates hidden within this 5-second battle. Maul attempts to use the same move that killed Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan's master, years before. However, Obi-Wan reacts precisely, splitting Maul's double-bladed saber in half, mortally wounding him in the process. While the clash doesn't last long, it's not so much the fight itself, but the dialogue prior to and after the duel that elevates its status. After striking the blow, Obi-Wan holds his oldest enemy in his arms as he takes his last breaths, while Maul asks if it's true that there is another chosen one. Obi-Wan's reply in the affirmative gives Maul some sort of comfort that one day he will indeed be avenged. The whole scene is a surprisingly touching and perfect end to one of the saga's oldest feuds. Number 5. Maul vs. Pre Vizsla, The Clone Wars. This is the only duel on the list featuring someone who is not Force sensitive. However, Pre Vizsla, the leader of the extremist Mandalorian group Death Watch, is no slouch and definitely a more than worthy opponent for the power-hungry and vengeful Maul. After working together for a period of time to overthrow the current government of Mandalore, Vizsla, who is voiced by Jon Favreau, betrays Maul and imprisons him. According to Mandalorian customs, if a ruler or leader is bested in combat, then the victor will be the one to take power and assume the role of leader. Maul is well aware of this and manages to escape and challenges Pre Vizsla to one-on-one combat. Vizsla wields the Darksaber, a lightsaber-like sword passed down through generations of Mandalorians dating back to a Mandalorian Jedi named Tar Vizsla. During the fight, Pre Vizsla employs the use not just of the Darksaber, but also of his other various weapons and gadgets, including blasters, his jetpack, explosives, and even a flamethrower, seemingly evening the playing field a bit. The use of these other weapons in the midst of the battle poses quite the threat and obstacle to Maul's victory. It's a brutal fight, one that appears to be more in the hands of Pre Vizsla early on. However, there is slowly a turning point in the duel as Maul begins to take out Pre Vizsla's secondary weapons one by one. After struggling to maintain step with Maul, Pre Vizsla is able to disarm him of his lightsaber, but after attempting to use the Darksaber against an unarmed Maul, Pre Vizsla finds his saber on the floor after Maul breaks his arm over his shoulder. Completely disarmed, Pre Vizsla continues to be kicked and beaten before Maul uses the Darksaber to decapitate his opponent in what is undoubtedly one of the most surprisingly brutal scenes of the Clone Wars. The duel is an action-packed, vicious, and savage face-off, one that is well worth watching and showcases the length Maul is willing to go to as he becomes the leader of Death Watch in his quest for power and in his hatred of those who may oppose him. Number 4. Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger versus the Grand Inquisitor, Star Wars Rebels. We all know the Clone Wars has some incredible lightsaber duels, but I think that Rebels gets the short end of the stick sometimes. In fact, I'd argue the fight that concludes the first season of Rebels is the most underrated duel of these rankings. After breaking Kanan out of his cell in the cruiser where he was being interrogated, above the planet Mustafar, Ezra and his master run into the Grand Inquisitor in the engine room. The engine room itself feels very reminiscent of the setting of the Duel of the Fates in The Phantom Menace. The fight that ensues also has many unique characteristics. Kanan uses the blaster within the hilt of Ezra's lightsaber, while the Inquisitor showcases his double-bladed saber with the signature rotating center. At one point, the Inquisitor throws his lightsaber towards Ezra, causing him to fall below and leaving Kanan to assume the worst. Kanan has some memorable lines, perhaps none more so than when he calmly states that it was a mistake to push Ezra off the edge, and the Inquisitor replies that Kanan no longer has someone left to die for him. Kanan responds by saying,
"No, because I have nothing left to fear."
Kanan uses both his and Ezra's saber for the remainder of the duel, a fast-paced clash between the two very equally matched foes. However, Kanan is eventually able to best his opponent as he slices through the rotating handle of the Inquisitor's double-bladed hilt, leaving him dangling from a ledge as his lightsabers plummet below, landing in an engine and engulfing the lower regions of the room in a ball of fire. Before the Grand Inquisitor freely lets go of the edge to face his fate, his final words are, "There are some things far more frightening than death," signaling he would rather die than face the wrath of Darth Vader. It is by far the best lightsaber duel of the Rebels' first season and rates extremely well against many of the other animated lightsaber duels across the entire saga. Number 3. Maul and Savage Opress vs. Darth Sidious, The Clone Wars. Similar to how I stated the top 4 duels in the live-action Star Wars rankings were in a tier of their own, it is the top 3 in animated Star Wars lightsaber duels that are a clear mark better than the rest. Not to give too much of a hint as to the top 2 spots in today's rankings, but from the time of its release in February of 2013, this duel from the Clone Wars was by far my favorite animated duel and would remain so for the next 3 years. We get to see lots of Maul and Savage in various duels throughout the Clone Wars, but it is certainly a rare opportunity to witness the Dark Lord of the Sith wield a lightsaber. In what begins as a non-hostile encounter, or as non-hostile as Darkside users can be, with Maul kneeling before his master, the tone immediately shifts when Sidious force pushes both Maul and Savage into the window, stating that he has become a rival. The lightsaber skills are simply on another level when it comes to this duel. particularly on the part of Sidious, who up until this point we had never seen perform so intensely and expertly with a lightsaber. The clear point of this battle between the brothers and the Dark Lord of the Sith is to assert his dominance and ensure Maul knows his place, or lack thereof. Maul and Savaj's attacks are merely hollow attempts to defeat or even impede Sidious's efforts. After temporarily incapacitating Maul, Sidious takes advantage of the opportunity to swiftly and perhaps even arrogantly drive both his crimson blades through the chest of Savage, leaving Maul to watch in horror. It's hard to escape the irony of this moment, seeing as this is exactly what Maul did to Qui-Gon, as Obi-Wan was forced to watch. In a final attempt to best his former master, Maul wields both his lightsaber as well as the Darksaber. However, Sidious quickly and easily bests him, as Maul begs for mercy. In an incredibly sinister line, Sidious calmly replies,
"There is no mercy."
Number 2. Ahsoka Tano vs. Maul, The Clone Wars. Not only is this duel fantastic as it ties in nicely with Episode 3 from a story perspective, it is uniquely beautiful stylistically and cinematically. It is the only duel in Star Wars to be portrayed using motion capture to track the movements of the actors and apply them to the animation. The result is a much more grounded and realistic duel, one not necessarily enhanced by over-the-top flips and spins that traditional animation can entail, but rather an Ahsoka and Maul with an undeniably human-like characteristic in their fighting styles. Ray Park, the actor that portrayed Darth Maul in both The Phantom Menace as well as Solo, was casted as Maul for the scene. So in fact, for the first time ever, while you are watching an animated Maul, the movements seem to so accurately mimic Episode 1 Darth Maul because it is in fact the same person. Prior to the duel ensuing, Ahsoka asks for answers from Maul as he attempts to persuade her to join him in destroying Sidious. Ironically, Maul is telling the truth for once when he reveals to Ahsoka that Sidious's plan all along has been to seduce Anakin to the dark side. However, Ahsoka's loyalty to Anakin is unwavering. The conversation leads to undoubtedly the best lightsaber duel of the Clone Wars. Normally, in an animated duel, your eye wouldn't catch the minute intricacies of lightsaber combat. Every clash of the blades shown via the motion capture feels amazingly distinct. Atop the rafters above the Mandalorian throne room, it is ultimately Ahsoka who is able to best Maul and is able to capture him along with the help of her clone troopers. What puts this duel on a pedestal is not simply the beauty in the motion capture. That part is evident. It is also the lines of morality that become grayed as we journey through a difficult decision-making process with Ahsoka. What Maul is suggesting, while it is certainly in his own interest, actually falls in line with what would be good for the whole of the galaxy in defeating Sidious. To trust Maul would also mean in many ways to give up her faith in Anakin, something she is unwilling to do at this point. Ahsoka and Maul certainly hold an interesting relationship, and this spectacular duel is one of the best examples of the unique dynamic the two have with one another. This list was extremely difficult to decide upon the top 10, so before the number 1 pick is revealed, here are a few more honorable mentions that came close to making today's rankings.
The student will kill the master.
Number 1. Ahsoka Tano vs. Darth Vader, Star Wars Rebels. What usually separates a great lightsaber battle from a good one is the context and meaning behind it. There's perhaps no battle in all of Star Wars with greater context or meaning than the epic showdown between the former Master and Padawan within the ancient Sith temple on Malachor. I will be the first to admit my bias towards Ahsoka, but that is also not to say that both this duel as well as the duel between her and Maul are not deserving of the top 2 rankings on this list. After Ezra activated the Sith temple, Vader arrives shortly thereafter and quickly bested Ezra in lightsaber combat, destroying his lightsaber in the process. But before Vader could finish him off, Ahsoka arrives. Initially, he offers Ahsoka a chance to join the Empire, but she refuses, claiming that she will avenge her master's death after Vader says that he destroyed Anakin Skywalker. The following dialogue is my favorite from all of Rebels.
Then I will avenge his death.
Revenge is not the Jedi way.
I am no Jedi.
The two face off in an emotionally intense duel. While he has the upper hand, Vader attempts to stop Ezra and Kanan, who meanwhile are trying to take the Sith holocron from the temple. As the two near Vader's grasp, Ahsoka runs from behind, striking Vader across the helmet, revealing the face of Anakin through the opening in the mask. This battle in many ways is very similar to the final battle of the Kenobi series, seeing as in both instances, a portion of Vader's mask was cut away during the duel, revealing his face. To gaze into the yellow eyes of her former master is a very surreal feeling. It reflects the extreme sadness in Ahsoka and brokenness in Vader. Even the voice of Anakin, intertwined with the more familiar mechanical Vader, is enough to pull on the heartstrings. It is this intense duel that is so captivating and ultimately meant to reveal the human side of Vader that still resides within, and most importantly, the undying love and compassion of a former Padawan to her former master. Check out the videos on screen. Thanks for watching this video. Remember to subscribe and hit that bell to know when the next Today's Rankings video goes live. Leave it a like and comment down below. What do you want to see ranked next? This has been Ben for Today's Rankings. Have a great day.